Hey guys, welcome. Welcome guys. A recap. Wansee actually I'm actually going to do two reactions on the same day. One going to be today and one going to be tomorrow. This will be Wansee Entertainment. Tomorrow will be Depp. So tune in for that. Um, this is my reaction video for Wansee Entertainment. So let's begin. I'm going to do this, then pause it and go to the next one. The videos will be on the others. So let's begin.
The person who experienced this incident is my uncle. One day, while chatting with a friend, they realized something shocking. They had both experienced a similar, unsettling event years earlier. When my uncle was young, he worked as a shepherd, grazing sheep in the mountains near his village. His work required him to stay with the sheep from noon until morning, often spending nights out in the mountains. On one evening, my uncle fell asleep while herding the sheep. Suddenly, in the middle of the night, he woke up and saw a creature unlike anything he had ever seen before. It had the head of a goat, but the body of a human. The creature was unclothed, with hooves for feet. At first, my uncle thought he was hallucinating, but the creature didn't disappear. It walked upright like a human and stared directly at him.
Okay, does that have to tell me I had to do the lab?
Shots at the goat-headed figure. After that, the creature walked away. Years later, when my uncle told this story to his friend was shocked. To my uncle's surprise, his friend revealed that he had also encountered the same kind of creature years ago.
Does that have to tell me I had to do the lab?
One morning, close to sunrise, he too had fallen asleep while herding sheep in the same mountains. When he woke up, he saw a creature with a goat's head and a human body standing right beside him. However, unlike my uncle's encounter, this creature didn't come towards him. Instead, it spoke in a strange, inhuman language before walking away. Both my uncle and his friend agreed that what they had seen was real. They described the creature in identical detail, from its unsettling goat-like eyes that moved naturally to its eerie tongue and mouth. Both were certain it wasn't a hallucination or imagination. They had both witnessed the same disturbing figure. This happened 17 years ago, when I was 10 years old, living in the Philippines. My grandmother, Yolina, owned a farm and had a bunch of animals. I had 4 cousins at the time: Pablo, Teresita, Alejandro, and Josephine. Each of us had different chores on the farm. I took care of the chickens and cows in the barn, while they looked after the sheep, cows, and dogs. My grandmother harvested fruits and vegetables. The first strange event happened when Alejandro was 9 years old. One night, grandmother asked him to fetch some beets, so he went out around 9 p.m. and didn't return until an hour and a half later. When he came back empty-handed, grandmother asked him where the beets were, but Alejandro just looked at her, confused. "I don't know what you mean," he said. He told her he had only gone to the outdoor bathroom and returned. He never heard grandmother ask for beets. After using the bathroom, he stayed outside playing with our two dogs, Lovely and Jean. So, who was it that went out after hearing grandmother's request? The next incident happened to Teresita. It was around 7 p.m. when she went outside to feed the dogs. She came back 30 minutes later, but something was off. She didn't have the empty food container with her like she usually did. Grandmother noticed laughter coming from Teresita's room. She went to check and asked, "Why did you just come inside?" But Teresita looked confused.
Grandmother, I haven't left my room since 6 p.m.
Grandmother thought she was lying. Her. So who had her seen outside? Then it happened to Pablo. One day, he stayed in his...
Okay, let's get back to it.
Grandmother left food outside his door, and each time she checked, the plate was empty. She assumed he was inside and didn't worry. But at around 5 p.m., Pablo walked through the front door.
"Hello, I just got back from the field,"
he said, holding a bundle of wheat, carrots, and potatoes.
"It took me a while to gather these."
We all stared at him in shock. Grandmother rushed to his room, flung the door open. No one was there. So who had been eating all the food that day? After all this, Grandmother finally said, "We're moving." Soon after, we sold the house and left. Before we moved, we asked the neighbors if they knew anything about the house's history. They said,
Many people hanged themselves from the large tree that stood there before the house was built, and previous owners have reported seeing doppelgangers.
and that's when we realized what we had seen were not our real family members. They were doppelgangers.
The radio.
My name is Zoe. It happened in the early 80s. I was about 5 years old. I had 4 friends who were, on average, 2 years older than me. I was known as a risk taker and was open to changes, no matter how dangerous, even as a kid. One day, I was playing with my friends and decided to go to a nearby birch forest, just across the road from my house. It was said to be haunted, but we went there anyway. It was just before evening. The sky was gray, and as we reached the birch forest, the atmosphere felt heavier, almost suffocating. This place was known for having dead trees, and people usually avoided it. By the time all 5 of us stepped inside, the uneasy feeling grew stronger, but we kept going until we came across an abandoned truck among the trees. Right next to it, we found some old planks, sat down, and started telling each other scary stories. One of my friends, let's call her Anna, started talking about a mysterious lady in red, rumored to be a witch who lived just a few blocks away. The thing was, the witch was still alive, and no one really wanted to mess with her. At one point, while we were swapping ghost stories, a sudden gust of wind swept through, making everything feel even more creepy. Then, as I turned around, I saw a red shawl or dress floating in the air near one of the birch trees, and it was moving toward us. That's when we ran, all of us. Being the youngest, I struggled to keep up. My friends could be a little mean sometimes, always making me prove how tough I was. They had already taken off, leaving me behind, while I ran as fast as I could, heart pounding and short of breath. I looked back, there it was, a red dress, strangely clean and bright for a place like that, still coming toward me. I pushed myself, harder, lungs burned, and finally made it home, still convinced the lady in red was following me. I never told my parents about what happened, but what could it have been? A floating red dress? A ghost? Something worse? I might have the answer. I haven't mentioned this yet, but there were always terrifying screams coming from a mansion near one of my friends' houses. Except, it wasn't just a mansion. It was supposedly a mental asylum, surrounded by electric fences. It looked abandoned. Locals said the woman who screamed was Greek and a so-called mental patient, but I have my doubts. That mental asylum was weirdly close to regular houses, yet no one ever came or went. No cars, no visitors, every window was shut. Who knows? Maybe that poor woman was being tortured by some psycho, and somehow that led us to seeing the lady in red. People whispered about black magic,
all the
drug-related
stories
murders,
were
and maniacs hiding in the neighborhood. I just hope, whatever it was, that it wasn't real. And worst of all, I hope it never follows me again.
okay. Here's the next one.
Hi, my name is Kai, and this happened to me when I was roughly 7 years old. I was out walking with my mother and her friend as the sun was beginning to set. We had been walking for a while when we decided to start heading back home. The sun had completely vanished and it was dark. As we were walking on the sidewalk, I decided to go ahead of my mother and her friend. I don't really know why. Maybe it was to feel a bit more independent. Soon after I walked away from them, I heard it from one of the houses behind me swinging open and slamming into the side of the house. A man walked out and began walking down the sidewalk that I was on. I didn't think much of it, but after a while of him following me, my young mind began to create scenarios. Fear began to get the best of me, and I turned around to see the man still behind me. He had curly hair and a mustache, and wore a strange-looking sweater with old glasses. He saw me notice him, but continued to walk closer. I decided to turn left and cross the street to the other sidewalk. My heart sank when he did the same. When he got to the sidewalk I was on, he frantically looked around, as if he were checking to see if someone was watching him. Then he continued after me. As he got closer and closer, I saw my mother walking on the sidewalk across the street, and I took my chance to run. I have never forgotten what happened after I ran to her. I turned to see the man staring at me from over his shoulder. His eyes were crazed, glaring at me with anger. Then he ran away, and I heard the same door slam shut. We went home, and I told my mom. I thought she didn't believe me, but later I found out that she did believe me and was trying not to scare me. Many years after that event, I went back to the house where the man had come from. I knocked on the door to be greeted by an old couple. I played it off as an accident and walked away. My friends and I have also reported seeing the man in an old, rusty, purple car. One day, after walking home from school, we went up to the car and looked through the window. The back seats had been ripped out. There were saws, hammers, and other tools lying in the back of the car. I don't think the intentions of that man were good. To this day, I occasionally wonder what would have happened if I hadn't run back to my mother, or if I hadn't kept walking.
Does your dog hate bath time? You need to try this. This is our lick mat. We put some peanut butter on there. Look at how sad he is to get in the bath.
I would like to stay anonymous, but I would like people to know that I am a 15-year-old girl, and this took place in a medium-sized town in northeast Maryland. One day, home from my friends, my dad on the road late at night, and it's illuminating our path, cars' headlights, and the street lights. I remember this night. It was a quiet one.
I'm back.
We live in the suburbs, but not many people were out. So when we saw this thing, my dad and I were the only ones to witness it. As we approached a roundabout, we both saw something in the distance that we first presumed to be a bird. But at the same time, it was huge and had a human-like body, unlike anything my dad or I had ever seen before. As we got closer, it suddenly extended its wings and flew away. As we exited the roundabout and got closer to home, I turned to my dad and said, "Did you see that? Or am I just hallucinating?" He had in his eyes, completely shook as we drove the rest of the way. When we arrived, my dad and I told my brother what had happened, but he just laughed and shrugged it off. I had a hard time sleeping that night. I just couldn't stop thinking about it. About a year later, We discovered a YouTube channel featuring videos about supernatural creatures and theories. One video in particular got our attention, and as we watched, we realized something. We think we know exactly what we saw that night. The Mothman. There have been sightings all over the world, but none here. Why is it in our town? Why did it want us to see it? I'm still terrified thinking about it to this day, knowing that it may still be out there, lurking.
And that creepy mob man.
From when I was about 8 years old, I can remember one night so clearly. My parents were leaving town for a wedding, and it was about 7 p.m. And mind you, I was going to be home all by myself. Before they left, they told me to lock the door and don't open it for anyone. And they said they would be back by 11 or 12. They told me to be asleep when they returned. I said bye to them, locked the door, and went back to playing with my toys in my room. Everything was going fine until I got this uneasy feeling, like someone was watching me. I shrugged it off, thinking it was nothing. Then 2 hours passed, and I wanted to cook something to entertain myself. I went to the kitchen and started grabbing things out of the refrigerator. Onions, cucumbers, tomatoes, etc. Then that feeling came back, but I shrugged it off again and didn't think about it. Mind you, I was a very brave kid, so that's why my parents left me by myself. I was starting to cut things and cook things, edible or not. Half an hour passed, and while I was cutting, I felt like I saw something out of the corner of my eye. I turned to look, and then I saw a gray-looking creature with dark eyes, bald, tall, and creepy-looking. It did not look anything like a human at all. It saw me looking at it, and then it vanished. I was frozen completely. I didn't even move or shake. I was just blank. After a few minutes, I cleaned up and started looking around the house. I was 8, so I wasn't thinking too much about it or what it could be. I checked the time, and it was past 10. I put on my PJs, brushed my teeth, and prepared for bed. I fell asleep. Then, a few hours passed, and I felt like someone was watching me. I opened my eyes and stood up. Then my shoulder felt like it weighed down, like something was pushing it down. I thought it was a reflex, but why would a reflex happen at this time? Then, as I looked at my doorway, I saw that creature again. We both looked at each other for a long 3 minutes. I was frozen again. Then I screamed as loud as I could, and I started to cry. By that time, my parents had already come home. My dad ran into my room and asked me what was wrong. I pointed at that thing, but he couldn't see it. And then it was gone, just like before. After that, it never appeared again. I hope it never comes back. I'm just so glad my parents were there to help me. But what if my parents had never come home? What would have happened to me?
Okay, guys, have a good day. Bye.